There's no such thing as a one-sided coin, just as there's no such thing as absolute morality. We are often taught what's right and wrong by those around us, and by the time we're old enough to question it, we already know better. Or at least we think we do. You've committed a grave error in a fit of rash impulse. Your older sibling has been one step ahead of you for as long as you can remember. By the time you'd learned to fish the mountain streams, they'd caught dozens of fish. You finally mastered climbing that towering cliff outside the village, but they were already at the top, bragging about their previous conquests. Martial arts, exploration, hunting, studies, you name it and they can do it better, faster, and with more skill. All of this was annoying, but tolerable. Until it wasn't. You aren't sure what the last straw was, but this time something in you just snapped. The world went red. There was no restraint, no thinking. It all happened so fast you couldn't even describe how you'd done it. But afterward, there was no denying the results. Your rage thrust your older sibling on a path to certain death, and there's nothing you could do to save them. At least, that's what your elders would have you believe, but you know there's another option. Deep in the heart of your village, a hidden power lies sealed away. Though it's forbidden to use it, you know this power is capable of healing your sibling's mortal wounds. You've been told all your life that to abuse this magic is a crime unforgivable within the world you know. To pursue this option, you would sacrifice everything you ever knew. Your friends would turn against you. The family who raised you would condemn you to exile. Your fate would be that of a hunted animal, expelled from its home and sentenced to death. So, what do you do next? Do you save your sibling and condemn yourself, or abide by the law and embrace your actions' consequences? Some would say the path of a ninja is a hard one, an uncompromising existence where duty to one's clan is worth more than life itself. To follow this code is the most righteous path one can walk. Any other choice would be the gravest of sins, plunging all those who stray into a dishonorable oblivion. But is it, really? For Yaiba Kamikaze, the choice was obvious. When he suggested the use of their clan's sacred ninpo to heal his sister Yuki, his father, the leader of the Kamikaze clan, was quick to admonish him, saying, "That is not the way of the ninja. There is no honor in fleeing death. She would be disgraced." "She'd be alive," Yaiba insisted. "Honor is life. A ninja without honor is the walking dead. A zombie." His father's voice carried an absolute conviction. So why couldn't Yaiba use the ninpo himself? Wasn't he a ninja too? Although he's a member of the Kamikaze clan and claims the same skills as the other clan members, the one ability he needed to save his sister was the only art he could never master. Yaiba was incapable of using ninpo techniques. The Kamikaze are descended from legendary kitsune spirits, which are recognized for their illusory magics and trickster ways. For even the small children of the clan, conjuring a basic substitution ninpo is a simple task. For Yaiba, it was impossible. Ninja clans are well known for their strict codes and isolationism from the modern world, but more than that, they're guardians of sacred relics and untold mystical power. Some clans use this arcane knowledge to conquer adversaries and seek influence, while others vow to seal away these profound artifacts, protecting humanity's future. While it's unclear what the Kamikaze clan's stance on these doctrines is, Yaiba knew his people had hidden away a sacred scroll that could alter reality and unravel time's linear nature. By reading this divine text, anyone, even Yaiba, could wield such power. Some might say that pride is deadlier than any sword, acting with poisonous subtlety that leaves little trace. There's no bullet holes, blast craters, or gaping lacerations left in its wake. Unseen, it moves inside harsh words and selfish intentions, lurking behind justifications whispered by those it blinds. When Yaiba challenged his clan's traditions, he expected the hardest part would be overwhelming the shrine's guardians, but the true test was yet to come. After stealing the scroll and heading back toward the Kamikaze family castle, he witnessed a scene so macabre it boiled his blood. In the great hall of his clan's castle, his father sat at the head of the room, with 2 of the clan's elders on either side of him. In the center of the chamber lay Yuki's decapitated corpse in a lake of blood. Yaiba demanded an explanation from his father, but the man kept his tone even as he replied in simple words, "We couldn't let you dishonor Yuki." Yaiba's rage awakened, his heart racing. How could his father allow such a grotesque punishment of his sister, though she'd committed no crime? Where was the honor he always preached? How could any of this make sense? He recalled the prideful certainty of his father from earlier that day, and suddenly a revelation overtook him. Honor is for fools, and is of no use to those who die pursuing it. Gripping his sword, Yaiba rips it from its saya and plunges it through his father's chest, howling about how he will show him the meaning of dishonor. But he doesn't stop there. The heir to the Kamikaze clan proceeds to eviscerate each of the elders in the chamber as well, an assault as brutal as it is efficient. While the old men scrambled to keep their guts in place, Yaiba used the stolen scroll, reviving each one of them moments before death claimed their souls. But this was no act of mercy or remorse. This was quite the opposite. "This scroll is amazing," Yaiba chides as he looks each one of them in the eye. "It brought each one of you back from the brink of death. Of course, now you want to kill yourselves, like you killed my sister. Better than dishonor, right?" The room fell silent, and Yaiba gained the answer to a question he hadn't yet asked. Staring him in the eye was something he loathed beyond any adversary he'd ever encountered, and it was abhorrent enough to redefine his purpose in an instant. This was the kind of ugly you can't unsee, a demon which haunts you for all your days. It was this moment of hesitation that told Yaiba everything he would ever need to know. Ninja are a plague. Before we go on, let's take a moment to perform the art of the fire wheel. It's a pretty basic technique that most ninja are familiar with, so it should be easy. Just close your eyes and take a moment to control your breathing. Feel the waves of spiritual energy that flow all around you and condense their oscillations into 3 points of singularity. Guide them with your arms so that they build energy as they swirl around your body. Squeeze these etheric focal points tighter and tighter with the power of your spirit until the pressure ignites the air around them into balls of fire. Ah, yeah, that feels much better. Wait, are you having trouble conjuring your fire wheel? It really is a simple technique, you know. Oh, you think I sound ridiculous and that the whole thing feels made up. I see. In that case, you might have a lot in common with Yaiba. For a practitioner of Ninpo to summon their arts, a mastery over spiritual elements and unseen forces is key. One has to see beyond themselves, glimpsing into the tapestry of reality itself to understand how all living energies connect and coalesce. Furthermore, one has to have a will strong enough to command manipulations of this tapestry, to summon phantasmic concepts into physical manifestations. In other words, Ninpo requires a stoic sense of one's greater purpose and how one's motives should be transcendent of introspective pitfalls. For Yaiba, these concepts are intangible. He measures all actions' value through the lens of cause and effect, disregarding messy notions like ideology or altruism. Though he knows Ninpo exists and that it has great power, he's blind to the foundations on which it's built. What he knows works. Mysticism is unreliable, but swords aren't. Ideologies fall victim to corruption, but actions speak truth. Honor relies on perception and handicaps those who favor pragmatic solutions. Good and evil are meaningless terms. There are only obstacles and solutions. That's not to say Yaiba wasn't willing to put his philosophies to the test. After leaving his clan, he spent years testing his beliefs against anyone brave or stupid enough to challenge him. He was more than willing to put his father's final words into action, determined to find his way to hell. Teaming up with rogue clans, criminal syndicates, and mercenary outfits, Yaiba quickly gained a reputation for being a bloodthirsty madman by those around him, but it was clear that all of them were missing the point, for Yaiba is still what he always was, a clear reflection of what ninja are at their core, stripped away of all fineries such as honor, discipline, or temperance. There is a legend in Japan about a sacred place far to the north, in a remote region where heaven and hell meet. The landscape smells of burning sulfur, where fields of volcanic rock stretch for miles, forming stony beaches which border eerie lakes. In the heart of it all, there is an ancient mountain, Mount Aore, on which there is a temple said to be the gateway to the underworld. But there are trials in place designed to determine one's worthiness, and even if passage is granted, the Kamikaze clan serves to guard their temple with lethal force, using a sacred sword known as the Tempest Blade. However, for Yaiba, this was just another chance to rid the world of more hypocritical ninja and their nonsensical oaths as he pursued a route to the land of Yomi. And if he managed to plunder a shiny new sword in the process, well, that was just icing on the cake. Legends are just stories, until they aren't. When Yaiba first heard of Mount Aore, he had dismissed it as another hyped-up bedtime tale passed down by a clan full of self-righteous posers, just like the many fables he'd heard growing up in the Kamikaze village. But when he arrived at the fiery shores of a brimstone river, it was clear there was more to the legend than hyperbole. You see, this obstacle was the first of 3 trials set in place by the ancient gods to test the mettle of would-be pilgrims. The first, a river known as Sanzunakawa, appears as a reflection of the sins we commit in life. For some, it's a placid, peaceful place with clear blue waters and a welcoming bridge. For others, it's an impassable torrent of flame and fury. I'm sure you can guess which version Yaiba ran into. However, as luck would have it, Yaiba wasn't alone. Alongside him, a fair young woman called for help as she was surrounded by several ninja warriors. Their swords were drawn and their intentions were clear, but the beautiful girl's fate was no concern to Yaiba. Far more interesting to him was the chance to dispose of more ninja garbage, which he did with eager precision. As it turned out, the assailants were members of the Kamikaze clan, keepers of the Tempest Blade. Keiko, the young woman Yaiba had just saved, was quick to tell him all about how they stood watch over the Storm Temple at Asore's peak. Furthermore, after she elaborated on Sanzunakawa's nature, Yaiba asked her what she saw. Yep, you guessed it, a bridge over calm waters. As a devout utilitarian, Yaiba knew that by asking her to carry him, he could cross without a problem. Again, the simple and practical solution is all that mattered, not the fuzzy implications of ideologies and honor. Keiko wondered if Yaiba was worried about being punished by the gods for his deception, but the exiled Kamikaze ninja shrugged off her concerns. As a ninja without ninpo, unsavory tricks were the most honest approach he knew. Underhanded tactics only work if there are underlying weaknesses to exploit, after all. A visionary is surrounded by blind spots, where a pragmatist capitalizes on missed opportunities. Likewise, he wondered if Keiko had similar concerns to her obliging his request. However, despite her beauty and charm, she harbored a deep resentment for the one who killed her brothers. She feared no god or man, fueled only by a lust for vengeance. After crossing the river and scaling the mountain's unforgiving walls, the final test was the Kamikaze clan themselves. To access the temple, one would have to exterminate the entire clan. For a common ninja, this would be an abhorrent and dishonorable task, but for someone like Yaiba, it was just another Tuesday. The Kamikaze's leader and wielder of the Tempest Blade was a proud warrior by the name of Garo. Though Garo was a master of illusory magic, Yaiba found his abilities paltry when compared to the ninpo skills of his former clan. You see, there's an advantage to being so unwavering in one's grasp on tangible reality. Illusions and magic feel cheap and obvious when you know their true nature. And because of this, Yaiba was able to see through Goro's ninpo, as one might look through a pane of glass. Without these ancient arts, the feared leader of the Kamaitachi was reduced to his skill with a sword. Unfortunately for him, Yaiba was a much better swordsman. After all the clansmen were dead, and Yaiba had claimed his prize of the Tempest Blade, Keiko realized the true nature of her so-called hero. Among the spoils of his past conquests were the handguards, or tsuba, of his defeated adversary's katana. He wore them around his waist with pride, and when asked later by a colleague, Yaiba claimed that he enjoyed the idea of his foes hearing him coming, and that it was more fun that way. Keiko hadn't paid it much mind at first, but when she noticed the dragon sigil on more than a few of these tsuba, she had the cold realization that the one she sought revenge against was none other than the man who had saved her. So it wasn't all that surprising when she turned on Yaiba, trying to kill him with a kodachi she carried on her back. Despite the initial confusion, Yaiba soon recognized the intricate dragon carved into her weapon's guard. Though she was of the Hayabusa clan, it was clear Keiko wasn't a trained ninja like her brothers. She'd been overwhelmed by the Kamaitachi at the shores of Sanzunokawa, something a true ninja would never have fallen victim to. She hadn't been able to climb the face of Mount Aore, relying on Yaiba to carry her, much like she had carried him across the river. The girl was in over her head, and she didn't even know it. With the Tempest Blade in hand, Yaiba dismissed her attack as he turned to make his descent from the Storm Temple. Keiko was enraged, but also horrified. She insisted, even as Yaiba knocked the sword from her trembling hands, that he couldn't abandon her at the mountain's summit. After all, she would be trapped up there alone, unable to climb down. It was a lack of foresight on her part, and an opportunity that Yaiba had no trouble exploiting. As he leapt from the ledge, he reminded her that this place was supposed to be the entrance to hell, so he was certain she could find her way there. Keiko, overwhelmed by fury, screamed curses at him from high above. Though he had claimed the Tempest Blade from the fallen Kamaitachi, she was certain that it would now be known as something else, taking on the persona of its new master. And that is how Heartless got its name. When later asked of Keiko's fate, Yaiba was dismissive. He knew the exploits of the Hayabusa clan's leader, Ryu. Retrieving the girl from Mount Aore would be simple for someone as skilled as him, but that's only if he could cross the shores of Sanzunokawa. After all, despite all his claims of justice and honor, Ryu's hands were covered in just as much blood. But that's a story for another time. When the Saki Brotherhood of Assassins got wind of the so-called Ninja Slayer, they couldn't afford to pass up the opportunity to get this guy on their payroll. But what they didn't anticipate, just like all the other organizations before them, was the fact that Yaiba couldn't be leashed. Still, it didn't stop them from trying, much to the chagrin of Jackie V, the Brotherhood lackey responsible for cleaning up after their newest pet. Though Yaiba accepted jobs from the Brotherhood, it was clear from the beginning that he never considered himself one of them. Like everyone else in his life, the Brotherhood was just a means to an end. They would gather intel on specific targets, usually rogue ninja clans, and if Yaiba took a shine to the job, he would exterminate the problem, free of charge, often in brutal fashion, regardless of time and place. Because of this, Jackie V was terrified of Yaiba and lived in constant fear of his new assignment. Everywhere Yaiba went, rivers of blood and viscera would flow. What Jackie couldn't seem to fathom, and what Yaiba never bothered explaining, is that a lust for violence and murder weren't Yaiba's motivation. Every foe he encountered, and every life he stole, was not a result of Yaiba being more skilled or resilient than his adversaries. No, his victories were stacked upon a singular truth. Ninja aren't willing to forego their honor to survive. Honesty, loyalty, integrity, and courage were all tenets of ninja philosophy, regardless of the clan name. But the fact remains that each of them commit despicable acts in the name of their code, hiding behind justifications they believe with unwavering blindness. Whether they view Yaiba as vile, unscrupulous, or cowardly makes no difference to him. They were still dead, and he wasn't. The double standard of it all was sickening, each encounter a reminder that Yuki's death was wasted. Had Jackie V known why Yaiba behaved this way, things might have been different. Maybe. But honestly, if Yaiba ever learned of what Jackie V was going to do next, there's little chance he would have judged the Brotherhood pawn too harshly. After all, his betrayal was a pragmatic response, given the circumstances. When backed into a corner, face to face with certain death at the hands of a madman, there are two things most people wish for in their final moments. One is obvious: a benevolent hero bound by a strong moral code who will intervene on your behalf. The second, though, is just as good in a pinch, and the latter option was the only one Jackie V knew he could rely on. The Hayabusa clan's reputation for safeguarding mythical relics is the world's worst-kept secret. Using his resources within the Saki Brotherhood to get a message to the Dragon Ninja, Jackie V was quick to sell Yaiba out for a shot at saving himself from the inevitable fate he believed was coming for him. Though Yaiba viewed himself as the best warrior this world has ever known, there was a name feared more universally by everyone on the wrong side of the law, and that was Ryu Hayabusa. Though Jackie had no illusions that Ryu would come save him, he was counting on the fact that Ryu was seeking the Tempest Blade stolen from Mount Aore, hoping to seal away its mystical power from those that would abuse it. Jackie wasn't praying for a hero. All he wanted was a welcome distraction. When the time came for the fateful encounter, Yaiba disregarded Ryu as just another ninja hung up on pretentious notions of altruistic duty. Throughout the fight, though the two men were equally skilled, Yaiba taunted his hunter, looking for any crack in his defenses. He mocked and derided Ryu at every opportunity, but Hayabusa said nothing. Unlike all the other ninja Yaiba had faced in the past, Ryu was equally fueled by conviction in his cause. The fight wasn't for the sake of pride or malice, but one of disposition. Yaiba was an obstacle for Ryu, just as much as Ryu was an obstacle for Yaiba. In the end, the dragon sword demonstrated its divine power, shattering the Tempest Blade and cutting down Yaiba in the process. However, in his moment of defeat, Yaiba was overcome by bitter clarity. There was no surge of rage or regret, but a smug irony that after all his hard-won conquests, his demise would come at the hands of the world's biggest hypocrite, a man whose hands were soaked in blood, yet claiming to be justified in such a wanton slaughter. Even as he fell to the ground, Yaiba was laughing. For him, at least there was a small consolation prize. All this time, after killing so many ninja, Yaiba was finally going to enter the land of Yomi. But he wouldn't be there long. In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. When Benjamin Franklin wrote these words, the certainty of our mortal expiration was immutable. Just as the sun inevitably rises and falls each day, so too are the births and deaths of all people. But death is hard to define. Back in old Ben's day, death was determined by observing when the heart stops beating or the lungs start breathing, despite the fact that technology to assess these conditions was all but non-existent. As humanity grew, and our understanding of physiology expanded, the definitions on how to measure death kept evolving. When a heart stopped, it didn't mean you were dead, but that you needed urgent medical treatment for cardiac arrest. If one stopped breathing, they could be revived through CPR or by emergency procedures. But there is still a line thought to be impassable by the current technologies, and that's the moment the brain ceases to function. When the lights go out, they stay out. Or at least, that was true for most of the world. As it turns out, there are those that have managed to cross this threshold, but what lies on the other side remains a nightmarish frontier where humanity and technology blur together. Hardware and software, organic and artificial, alive or dead, become relative terms. There are few corporations unscrupulous enough to venture into such morbid research. For some of you, Myst will come to mind almost immediately, but there is another, more successful party that succeeded in ways Myst could only dream of: Forge Industries. Forge's lead scientist, the enigmatic Miss Monday, was a prodigal genius in fields of biomechanical systems and neuroscience. To her, artificial limbs, cybernetic implants, and neurological architecture were as simple as breathing. People are machines at their core, and machines can be restored when the right parts are replaced. The cardiovascular system is, in essence, just a pump, some pipes, and fluid. Respiratory organs are functionally a set of gas exchangers and diaphragms, and the brain, as complex as it is, can be mapped and partitioned using nanotechnology, just like any other computer. Though Yaiba was gone, he was far from useless. Forge gathered up his pieces, stitched him together, and reignited his brain, but it wasn't an act of charity. Ryu Hayabusa was in someone else's way too, and you know what they say about the enemy of your enemy. Looking at what remains of Odessa in southern Ukraine, it's hard to imagine such a place as the Jewel of the Black Sea. Jagged bones of skyscraper husks claw at the sky, projecting upward from mountains of broken concrete, rusted cars, and shattered streets. Ghosts of more than 1 million lost souls linger in the remains of this dead city. This was the epicenter of Compound 72's containment breach, resulting in the worst bioweapons disaster ever recorded. In the days following the outbreak, Yaiba found himself thrust in the middle of this apocalyptic nightmare. At first, he didn't care why or even how he was there. As always, the tangible facts were all that mattered. He'd awakened inside an unmanned aerial vehicle above a burning metropolis he didn't recognize, surrounded by fighter jets belonging to the Russian military. His arm, which he'd lost when Hayabusa had defeated him, was replaced by a brutish hunk of steel and hydraulics. A cybernetic camera and microprocessors mingled with what was left of his organic brain, their hardware spliced into his face's left side, but none of it bothered him or even slowed him down. All that mattered was getting to the ground and hunting down Ryu. This was the exact bet Forge gambled on. With Miss Monday in his ear guiding him through the chaos, and Forge's CEO, Alarico Del Gonzo, sharing just enough intel to keep him focused, Yaiba tore through the ruins of Odessa, cutting down infected hordes and Russian troops alike. But Yaiba isn't affected by the carnage or the doom that surrounds him, and he wastes no energy concerning himself with the morality or implications of these events. His only concern is a second shot at the only ninja he couldn't slay, and the question that had been bothering him ever since he'd returned from his demise. For all his claims of righteous intention and moral superiority, wasn't Ryu's soul just as black as his own? Was Hayabusa really here to save these people? Or was he here to satisfy a vindictive urge to kill those he judged as unworthy to live? Yaiba despised the thought that someone like Ryu, who commits just as many atrocities as himself, could have the reputation of an honorable hero, as if the world could cherry-pick his achievements from the filth of his sins. There was no bigger hypocrite in Yaiba's eyes, and it fueled a deep loathing in his soul. After clawing through Odessa's burning streets and using the underground sewers to locate the source of Compound 72's containment breach, Yaiba finally managed to confront Hayabusa in the depths of a secret Soviet-era facility known as the Lazarev Institute. Of course, all of that was meaningless to Yaiba. All that mattered, maybe all that had ever mattered, was proving his point, that when the odds are stacked against him and the price of honor is too steep, Ryu would crumble, just like everyone else. However, when the moment came, their first rematch was inconclusive. Yaiba pursued Ryu with relentless focus, chasing him through the depths of Lazarev as a predator chases prey. Hayabusa was constantly forced into defensive positions, teleporting through the depths among broken platforms and ventilation systems. While Yaiba could never score a lethal strike, each attack weathered away Ryu's defenses, little by little. In the end, though, his efforts were in vain. Cornered and growing weary of Yaiba's persistence, Ryu summoned his ultimate ninpo technique, a manifestation of his ancestral bloodline. Surrounding his body with flames in the form of a dragon, he lunges himself forward to attack Yaiba. The kamikaze runaway is unfazed by this display of raw power, meeting Ryu's attack head-on in midair. Both men crash to the depths of the earth, slamming each other against equipment and walls as they descend. Yaiba, regardless of his disadvantage, still managed to inflict some damage, But he was in no match against Ryu's Azuna drop technique, and soon found himself plummeting in a spiral pattern, ripping through the air toward the rocky ground far below. The impact was incredible. White-hot energy rocked the entire chasm, filling the space with unimaginable pressure. Stone fractured at the epicenter, with Yaiba's corpse lying still in the heart of it all. Yet, Miss Monday had an ace up her sleeve, and by depleting the charged backup capacitors inside Yaiba's core, she was able to kickstart his cybernetic systems to life again. As the reactor routed power back into his implant, Yaiba woke up frustrated and undeterred. At the bottom of the mining tunnel, Ryu and Yaiba discovered the putrid source of the mysterious Compound 72, an ancient alien corpse buried deeper than humanity's collective memory. Strange larvae leached off the corpse's repugnant blood, as Yaiba turned to face off with Ryu for a second time. The ensuing battle was brutal, with both men clawing for victory over the other. Despite all Ryu's skills and sterling reputation, Yaiba was an even match for the super ninja, his heartless blade striking true against the dragon sword time and time again. Mamaji, the Hayabusa Shrine Maiden, was there to ensure the destruction of the ancient alien god, but due to Yaiba's interference, it was all she could do to help provide Ryu with additional defense, diverting her attention to heal his exhaustion. And there it was, the chink in his polished armor. Yaiba knew that Ryu would gladly give his own life to prove a point, and there would be no greater honor than to have paid such a steep price. But what about Mamaji? Honor dictates that such a distinction is irrelevant, and if Ryu is as righteous as he claims, then he should have no trouble sacrificing her to achieve his goals. So, Yaiba struck Mamaji down by hurling a pus-filled larva at her as she attempted to heal Hayabusa's wounds. Covered in slime, she collapsed to the ground, her strength waning. Now, without her protection, Yaiba was finally able to push Ryu to his limits, pummeling the Hayabusa ninja into submission with brutal efficiency. In a last-ditch effort to overcome this harrowing situation, Mamaji tossed Hayabusa the Eye of the Dragon, a sacred gem meant to awaken the divine potential of Ryu's weapon, transforming it into the true dragon sword. Utilizing this surge of energy, Ryu again attempted to overwhelm Yaiba with his ultimate ninpo, summoning the dragon's flaming form around his body, just as he had done before. However, this time Miss Monday had modulated Yaiba's arm to emit an interference waveform that would nullify Ryu's ninpo. Slamming his fist forward, he dispelled Hayabusa's magic, shattering the rocky platform on which they stood with the ensuing blast. Yaiba managed to dodge the falling rocks and gaping chasms, but Mamaji wasn't so lucky. As she toppled, pleading for Ryu's help, Yaiba watched with bated breath. This was it. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. Would Ryu abandon his mission, his duty to save her? How much is honor really worth? Ryu fought with every fiber of his being to save the Shrine Maiden, sinking his sword into the stone to hold it in place. He was defenseless, abandoning his objectives in the face of selfish heroism. Delganzo ordered Yaiba to finish the job, but Yaiba had no interest in wasting such a golden opportunity. Ryu's strength would eventually fail him, and the clock was running out. Despite all his prattling about duty and justice, Ryu made the same mistake as everyone else. He let his emotions get in the way. When all the cards were laid on the table and it was time to call his bluff, the Hayabusa ninja picked Mamaji. Mission be damned. In Yaiba's eyes, it was no doubt disappointing. Just another hypocrite after all. But there was no chance to savor the imminent defeat. Due to his lack of commitment, or at least in Delganzo's opinion, a secret contingency plan was set in motion. To tie up all loose ends, Alarico had installed a failsafe in Yaiba's cybernetic core, a micronuclear fission bomb. Why take a chance leaving loose ends when he could kill 3 birds with 1 explosion? This sent Yaiba over the edge. If there was anything he hated more than hypocrites and ninjas, it was being manipulated. He was no one's tool, and even if it meant the end of everything, he could never allow Delganzo the satisfaction of such a cowardly victory. Ripping the core from his chest, Yaiba flung the bomb into the depths of the earth, where it careened out of sight before erupting into a ball of superheated flaming debris. This sudden shift in dynamics allowed Momoji enough time to gain her footing and find her way to safety in Ryu's arms. Though his mission was technically a failure and the cure for Compound 72 had been lost, the Dragon Ninja still offered his thanks to Yaiba, assuming that his sudden self-sacrifice came from a tiny seed of good buried deep within his blackened soul. Again, Ryu missed the point. Yaiba collapsed, his final breath cursing Hayabusa's conceited delusion as the world melted into oblivion. As many times as he tried to claw his way into hell, it seemed the land of Yomi refused him any quarter. 3 weeks later, in the bowels of Forge's headquarters, Yaiba awakened to a splitting headache, accompanied by a searing pain in his chest. His core had been replaced, courtesy of Miss Monday, with a scrapped power supply from an industrial refrigeration unit. Monday was quick to explain how Alarico had become unhinged after the discovery of the alien corpse buried beneath southern Ukraine. Fueled by obsession, Forge's CEO had spared no expense in excavating the monster, harvesting its tissues to concoct a new compound, a more refined drug with the intention of achieving immortality. He'd gone mad with power, turning on his most loyal allies, even attempting to kill Monday herself. That was the last straw, and she felt that Yaiba was her best shot at stopping Alarico's madness before it consumed the world. And, in true Yaiba fashion, he didn't really care about any of it. What he did care about was teaching that foolish, smarmy Spaniard a lethal lesson. No one messes with Yaiba and lives to brag about it. If the world got saved in the process, then humanity would have a second chance that it didn't deserve. So Yaiba eviscerated Forge's mobile headquarters, ripping apart infrastructure, destroying engines, wrecking laboratories, and cutting down experimental creatures who had escaped their cages. Monday stuck with him every step of the way, guiding him to a new cybernetic core to replace the one he'd lost in Ukraine, helping him to bypass Alarico's security measures, and even guiding him to where her employer had hid himself away, along with the ugly truth of his condition. Alarico wasn't just mentally unstable, but he was physically dying as well. His body, a withered and shriveled husk contained in a vat of the new compound, looked nothing like the suave hologram avatar Yaiba had grown to recognize. Still, despite his desperate condition, the madman broadcast his voice into Yaiba's ear, prattling on about how much of a genius he was and how he'd actually been soft on Yaiba. Blah, blah, blah. It was all just noise, the dying manifesto of a doomed man. As Yaiba pummeled his medical equipment, Alarico was forced to retreat into his new body prematurely, a decision that would ultimately result in his undoing. Even though the new compound was able to grant him supernatural powers and the ability to create pocket dimensions, it was not enough to make him a true immortal. The stone and metal monstrosity that Dalgonzo now inhabited was still susceptible to Heartless's bite, and even though the battle was brutal, Yaiba was able to pull the psychopath apart, piece by bloody piece. Once his new body was made utterly useless, Alarico emerged from the wreckage, slithering along the ground like a wounded maggot. Yaiba raised his blade to finish the job, but in the end, Monday was the one to pull the plug, using her long-barreled .44 Magnum. The nightmare had ended before it had even begun. Or had it? Though Forge had been gutted by Alarico's demise, the consequences of Dalgonzo's hubris would leave a scar upon Eastern Europe that may never heal. Ukraine was ravaged by the highly contagious outbreak, now left unchecked and without a cure in sight. Yaiba had destroyed the only known documentation from the original Lazarev research team, but that didn't mean the knowledge was lost. Using her spectacular skills, Monday is able to recover recordings of the Lazarev journal from Yaiba's cybernetic eye, and along with it, the cure to the plague. Yet, the two of them withheld this life-saving technology for months, allowing the disease to spread throughout Ukraine and neighboring countries before finally selling the information to the highest bidder, desperate pharmaceutical companies looking to make a fortune. This speaks volumes about Yaiba's outlook on humanity as a whole. When given the opportunity to save countless lives, instead of jumping at the chance to be a force of good, the ex-kamikaze ninja paused to reflect on one simple question. Why? What had humankind done to earn his goodwill, after all? Throughout his life, a singular theme was always present with regard to people. No matter what happens, all actions are fueled by selfishness. His father, moved by selfish pride, took the life of his only daughter and exiled his son, who had tried to save her, but he couldn't bring himself to honor the code by taking his own life. Keiko, the young woman from the Hayabusa village, wore a facade of innocence while harboring a selfish desire to exact revenge, no matter the cost. Jackie V, though a cowardly worm, was quick to capitalize on any opportunity to save himself from a threat that wasn't even real, betraying Yaiba unprovoked by selling him out to Ryu. And speaking of Hayabusa, when faced with the chance to save humankind and finish Yaiba, he chose instead to attempt to save Mamaji, a selfish act given the cost as a whole. At least Delganzo was always obvious with his goals, even if he was intending to betray those closest to him to achieve them. And so, who was he to break tradition? Yaiba was still human after all. And though you might call him unscrupulous, villainous, or downright evil depending on your point of view, like everyone else before you, you would be missing the point. Yaiba is a pragmatist, through and through. All disappointment, rage, excitement, or camaraderie you might feel toward him is a symptom of your expectations, not his behavior. So be warned, auditors. If you should encounter the Ninja Slayer, don't underestimate him, and don't make faulty assumptions. Both mistakes should cost you your life.